Hey guys, welcome to T-Bones Tech. Today's video is my beginner guide to the brand new Canon EOS Rebel T8i, also known as the A50D. In this video, we are going over all the different menus, buttons, and settings, and we're also going to explain how you can shoot this camera in full menu mode so you can get the absolute most out of it. Alright, so let's just jump into it. Our first step is to remove our little sensor cover here, and we're going to twist it counterclockwise and then just pull it off just like this. Now we'll take our lens, twist that off counterclockwise, put that to the side, and then simply line up the white square with the white square on the camera body, and then just like I said, line them up and then twist until you're a click, just like that, and now our lens is attached and ready to go. Now to remove our lens cover, we just pinch and then remove it just like this, and now we have the camera almost ready to take pictures. But the next thing we have to do here is to supply power to our camera, and this step is pretty simple. All we do is we open up the little bottom cover here, and then we take our battery with the arrow facing this way, and we just pop it in until we hear a click, just like that, and then simply snap the cover in again until you hear a click, and then you're good to go. Now the last step we have to do is we got to put our SD card in our camera so we can actually record videos and photos to our camera. The SD card slot is located here on the side. All we do is we press it out towards us, and then it opens up just like this. Then we take our SD card again facing this direction, and then simply press this in again until you hear a click, just like that, and then we can close it again until we hear a click, and now we are good to go. Now let's go ahead and turn the camera on, and it's super easy on this camera. All we do is we press this little button all the way to the on position, and if we want to record video, we're going to press it one more time to the video section. But first, we're going to start off with the photography section, so we're just going to press it to on. Now as you guys can see, there isn't any screen on the back, and that's because we actually have to open it up. So here's a little cutout for our finger. We open this up, and then we twist it just like this, and here we can see our screen on the back of the camera, and we are ready to go. This is a touchscreen, but you also can use the controls here to navigate the menu. You can use up and down, or you can use this little wheel as well. But the very first thing we're going to do here is we're going to remove this annoying beep so you don't hear that every single time I press a setting. So we're going to go over to the wrench here, and then over here we're going to go down to beep, and we're going to switch this from enabled to disabled, and now we no longer have that annoying little beep. So right now our camera is in the automatic mode, as you guys can see right here, and because of that we're going to have a limited menu. There aren't a ton of different settings that we actually can change here with having a limited menu. But if we switch over to menu mode on the camera by moving our mode dial right here to the M, and that's going to be our menu mode. Here in menu mode we have a ton more options here in the settings, and we're going to be able to control the camera much better when the camera is in menu mode. So next up we have here is the mode dial, and you can access it just by twisting it here in the top right corner of the camera. First mode we're going to talk about is our Scene Intelligent Auto Mode. So in this auto mode, our camera makes all the decisions for us. It's great for beginners. All you do is you point the camera at your subject and you press down on the shutter button, and it takes a photo. And something that's really cool about the T8i is you can pinch to zoom just like an iPhone to check for sharpness. And here we can see that the auto mode did a very good job at taking that photo. And again, if you're a beginner, I definitely recommend just keeping in auto until you learn more about photography. The next mode we have here is our special scene mode. This is a really cool and powerful tool where, again, you don't really have to know a ton about photography, but you can actually choose the individual scenes that you want to shoot. So here we can see night portrait, handheld, HDR backlit, portrait, smooth skin, group photo, landscape, close-up, there's sports. There's just a ton of different modes here. And by selecting one of these modes, it tells your camera what you are shooting, and then the camera can make very good guesses as to what to do to the exposure or the f-stop, etc. So here in a group photo mode, it's going to use a slower aperture to get everybody nice and focused rather than using a fast aperture, which would have a very shallow depth of field, and this lady probably would be the only person in focus when that would happen. All right, next up we have our creative filters mode, and this is a little bit silly, but also does have some powerful tools in here, like our HDR Vivid and our HDR Standard. This is, again, great for beginners, but then we have some small, silly little, miniature effects, which can be definitely very fun for beginners, but this is definitely not very realistic. So here we have the fisheye. Let's take a picture and see what happens. And here we can see it distorted it like a fisheye would. Basically, this is just filters, and again, we could always do this in post, so kind of a joke, but definitely still can be fun. The next mode we have here is probably the mode that I stick in most, and that's menu mode. Here we can fully control our camera completely. So here we can control our shutter speed, our aperture, and our ISO, along with a ton of other features like focusing and where to focus. So just a ton of really cool features built into this menu mode where you can completely control our camera. And later in this video, we're going to show you how to properly expose a photo and how you can manage your shutter speed and f-stop and aperture. All right, so next up we have here is our AV mode, or our aperture priority mode. And here they actually give us two examples. Here the blurred is going to be using a fast f-stop like f1.8 or f2.8, and here when we see sharp, it's probably using something like f8 or maybe even f16. Now when we're in this mode, by changing the shutter speed dial actually changes our aperture. So normally this is going to control our shutter speed, but here in this mode it actually changes our aperture. All right, so next up we have here is our TV mode, and here we actually control our shutter speed. So it's shutter speed priority mode, and here we can see that when you use a slow shutter speed, you get nice flowing water, but if you use a fast shutter speed, you freeze that motion. So here, when we use our shutter speed dial, it adjusts our shutter speed. So here we can see 1/200th of a second, and we can stop down all the way to 1/60th of a second, which is going to give you more of that flowing look. So this is really cool, and Canon does a great job of explaining this all built into the Canon T8i. All right, so last up we have here is our program mode. So for people who aren't happy with auto mode and they're getting too bright results, you're going to probably want to switch over here to program mode. So here we can see it's evenly exposed as it should be. But let's say we want to make this picture that we shot in automatic mode darker. We're going to switch to program mode, and here we can actually tell the camera that we want our picture to be darker. So here we're just going to change it just right here, and we're going to bring it a stop down. And again, the camera is going to do everything for us. So let's take a picture here. And here we can see that it's a little bit darker. So here's our darker picture, and then here's our brighter picture. So again, program mode is very handy for those of you who don't want to learn all the basics of photography, but you still want to control whether your pictures are brighter or darker. So now we're going to switch back to menu mode. Here in menu mode, we can control every aspect of our picture. So we can change our shutter speed, we can change our aperture, and we can change our ISO. So let's go ahead and take a sample shot, and we're going to use all these exact settings and see how it comes out. By giving our shutter button here up the top a half press, it actually meters the light, and here we can see that the picture is going to be underexposed. You want it to be right here in the middle to be evenly exposed. So let's go ahead and take a picture here. So here we can see our picture is extremely dark. So what settings can we change to make the picture brighter? Well, the first thing we can do is use a slower shutter speed, so more light comes into our camera sensor. So as you can see here, as we move our shutter speed down and use a slower shutter speed, we get closer to having an even exposure. So right now we're using a 1/15th of a second shutter speed, which means that handheld it's going to be a little bit blurry, but if we're sitting here on a desk, we should be fine, and now our exposure should be even. So let's take a picture right now. And here we can see we have a nice and even exposure, and just a little bit blurry because there's a little bit of shake here on the camera when I did take that photo. So let's bring our shutter speed back to around where it was originally. And now we're going to try to make our picture brighter by changing the f-stop. So a slower f number creates a brighter image. So here we can use a little dial here on the bottom. We can spin it, and if we spin it to the left, it's going to use a faster picture. So let's go back to f5.6 and take a picture. And here we can see it is very, very dark. So now let's go ahead and shoot at f4. And here at f4, we can see it's a little bit brighter. So the fastest this lens is an f4 lens, so we can't go any faster up to like f2.8 or f1.8. The fastest we can do is f4, so that's the best we can do right there. So next thing we're gonna do is we are going to change our ISO. Now to change the ISO, we press down on this little ISO button, and then we can use our shutter speed dial, and we can adjust it like this. Of course, we also can use the touchscreen. So for this example, let's go ahead and use a ISO 400. And here at ISO 400, we can see that we're going to be pretty much evenly exposed, a little underexposed. So let's go ahead and take a picture here. And now here again, we can see we have another perfectly exposed picture, and everything looks good. So here we can see that there are multiple different things that you can change to get an evenly exposed picture. You can tweak around all these different values and see what happens. Okay, so now that I've showed you how to change all these settings, let's actually go ahead and demonstrate what they all do. So we're gonna start off by using a nice and slow shutter speed. So we're going to stop down our shutter speed all the way to 1/25th of a second. And as we take the picture, I'm gonna shake the camera just a little bit left to right. So here we can see that the photo was very blurry because we're using a slow shutter speed. Everything that's happening while I'm taking the picture is going to be recorded. And because of that, we have a nice blurry photo. Now let's go ahead and use a faster shutter speed, like 1/800th of a second. And again, I'm going to shake the camera a little bit while I'm taking the photo. And here we can see the photo is way sharper than it was when I was using a slower shutter speed. Our photo still isn't perfect because again, I was moving and you don't want to move when taking a photo, but here is a really good example of how shutter speed can affect your photo. So for example, if you're taking photos of kids and they're moving and they're running around fast, you're going to want to use a nice and fast shutter speed. So something like 1/800th of a second or even faster. The fastest this camera can do is 1/4000th of a second. That's going to freeze almost anything. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is our depth of field, and that is our aperture. So here the fastest lens can go is f5.6. So let's go ahead and switch this to a live view by pressing this button right here with the little red mark, and that's going to switch us to live view. And here, let's go ahead and take a picture, and we have our ISO at auto, so it's going to make our exposure nice and even no matter what settings we change here to the left. So let's go ahead and take a photo. And here we can see that the camera is nice and sharp, but the background is not. It's very blurry. There's a lot of times where you want your subject to be sharp and your background to be blurry, but sometimes you want both to be sharp. Well, how can we do that? Well, we can change our aperture. And we'll stop down all the way to f8. We'll go ahead and take a picture here. And here at f8, we can see it's a little sharper. So here's our photo at f5.6, and then here's our photo at f8. And here we can see that at f8, both the camera and the background are relatively sharp. Now let's go ahead and stop down all the way to f16 and take a photo here. And here at f16, we can see the brick is perfectly sharp and so is the camera. A very big difference between f8 and f16 here. Here at f16, everything is in focus, and here at f8, the background is still just a little bit soft. All right, and the last thing we're gonna talk about here is our ISO. Now, the lower ISO number you use, the less grain and the higher quality photos we're gonna have. The sharper they're gonna be, the lower the number. So something like ISO 25,600 is gonna be very grainy, and something low like ISO 100 is gonna be your sharpest option. So let's go ahead and take a photo here at ISO 400. All right, so let's go ahead and max our ISO out all the way to ISO 25,600 for this example. So we're gonna just go all the way over here and shoot here. And now, because we're using such a sensitive ISO, we have to change our shutter speed. We have to use a very, very fast shutter speed to get our exposure to be nice and even. So let's go ahead and take a photo here and see how it looks. So here's our photo at ISO 25,600, and here's the photo that we shot at ISO 400. We can see ISO 400 is much sharper than ISO 25,600. So to get the best possible images, we want to shoot at a lower ISO number. So the last thing we're going to do here is we're going to dive into some of the menus. So we can access that by pressing the menu button here in the top left corner of the camera. And here we can see a ton of really helpful and useful information. The first thing we're going to talk about is our image quality. So let's open up that. And here we can shoot in JPEG and also in RAW. RAW gives us more raw information from the sensor. If you're going to be enhancing or editing your photos in post-production, you definitely want to shoot in RAW video. And here we can also see that JPEGs are also an option, but we can actually change the resolution that they are shot at. If you want a smaller photo, you're going to want to use small 2. But most of you guys paid a lot of money for this camera, so you want to be shooting it in the highest quality resolution, which is all the way here to the left. As you guys can see, there is a ton of information here because we are in the manual mode, and I'm going to just slowly go through a ton of this information while pointing out a little bit. Here we can change the white balance. Here we have noise reduction after long exposures. There's just a ton of really in-depth information that I just don't have time to go through all in this video. Here we have our playback settings. Again, you're not really going to want to mess with that all too much. In the next section here, we have our wireless settings. So this camera does have Wi-Fi and also Bluetooth, and here's where we go to connect our phone. The next section here, we have our wrench, and this is just a great tool to get into some of the really deep settings. Here we can change the brightness, change our date and time and everything like that. We can disable that beep. And here we have our battery information, and here we can see the life left in the battery and also our battery percentage. Here we can go through a sensor cleaning and a ton of other really cool stuff just like this. But again, for the average person, you really don't need to dive too far into these menus. And the last thing we have here is our display settings. So we can actually go ahead and change what type of display we want and what information we want where on this camera, which is also really cool. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give me a big thumbs up down below, and of course make sure to hit the subscribe button, and then you'll be notified every single time I upload a brand new video just like this one to my YouTube channel. But again, that's all I got for you guys in this video, and I'll catch you all in the next one.